Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director for the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. We're co-founder of the Hawthorne Huddle. I would like to welcome you to our June meeting. Today is June 1st. And as always, I'm honored to have my good friend, Ms. Ann DeGroot, Mr. Clarence Jones, and Mr. Al McFarland, who will moderate the meeting for us. And so without further ado, Mr. Al, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, and I'm excited about today's Hawthorne Huddle. We're witnessing history, we're making history, and we're fortunate enough to have the engines of change, the sources of change for the better for our community on our program or in our Hawthorne Huddle today. So I'm excited. And I hope that everybody else is excited as well. I hope we all had a safe and, just a reflective Memorial Day. We're beginning summer. It's going to be hot today. Hope we stay safe all summer long. And finally, my opening remark is that it's so wonderful for us to spend this time together in community every month. So let's make this a wonderful program as we always do. Let me first of all ask Luisa Pessoa-Brandão from Minneapolis Health Department to give us a COVID and other health issues update. Luisa, good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see everybody. Happy summer. It is hot and muggy out there. I can attest to that. Don't enjoy it particularly. So I'm a 70s, low 80s kind of person, no humidity. Anyway, COVID is down across the board. All of the metrics are down: hospitalizations, cases, deaths, which is a good thing. We're still seeing elevated levels in wastewater, which means that people are, still testing positive likely, but hopefully it's not a serious illness since we are not seeing the hospitalizations. There are some there have been some updated recommendations around the vaccine. Now you are up to date. Even if you didn't receive the original 2 series vaccine, if you just get your bivalent, what they're calling the updated vaccine, 1 shot, you're up to date. So that protects against the original strain and the Omicron B4, B5 strains. So much easier to be up to date with the vaccine. And for those that are 65 or older or immunocompromised, there is a recommendation that if it's been more than 6 months since you got that updated booster, that you could get another shot. We've seen in the past that COVID has some summer waves. So, we might see an increase in cases over the next few weeks. We're sort of, COVID has been an unusual respiratory infection.
Okay,
in that,
so who am I speaking with?
Oh, sorry. My name is Fue Lee.
Somebody mute. Yeah.
And that in that we've seen summer increases, which is not usual with our respiratory infections. So that's COVID. The other thing that we are keeping an eye on is that we've seen some clusters of Mpox cases in Chicago and New York. And so, really recommended that if people that are possibly at risk have not gotten their Mpox vaccine, to do so. The city of Minneapolis is hosting some vaccine clinics where Mpox vaccine is being offered in conjunction with a Mother's Love and with a family partnership. And so we are encouraging those that are at risk to get that Mpox vaccine. There is no shortage at this time. So, it's not being, when we first had the increase in cases last summer, there were different restrictions on who could get the vaccine. Those are not in place. And so recommending that people get the vaccine is, again, a 2 series, 2 shots. But we don't want to see an increase in cases like we had last summer. It can be very painful, and it can be, you can end up in the hospital. So it's not something that we want anybody to experience. So those are the 2 main things that, and with summer coming and people being outside, remember to wear your sunscreen, remember to, hydrate well, and just enjoy our, time to be outside and be active. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Luisa. Any questions or comments? Diana?
The RSV, how is that affecting people?
Right now, that really was last winter, a little bit earlier, and we don't have that. But the exciting news is that the vaccine for RSV has been approved, and the recommendation has also now been made that it can be used for younger kids. So hopefully that will help us not see the numbers. We had kind of a tridemic, as we called it, in the fall, a little earlier than we expected with flu, RSV, and COVID. And hopefully the vaccine being approved for those that are 65 and older and for younger children will allow us to, tamp down on those numbers for RSV if there's good vaccine uptake. So I'm sure that as fall approaches, you'll be hearing more about RSV vaccine and having it be available, just because that is the cycle. Usually RSV is a fall winter illness as well. So
Are there questions or comments? Hey, Luisa, thank you so much. Let's keep moving. Bill Magnuson is here with our update from the 4th Precinct. Good morning, Bill.
Morning, sir. How are you doing?
Excellent.
Good. So I guess I'll get right into it. I'm going to do the part 1 crimes, and I remind everybody of part 1 crime is anytime there's a victim involved in a crime. So these are more serious offenses. So for Hawthorne for May, there was 0 homicides. There was 1 rape, 2 robberies, 24 aggravated assaults, 7 burglaries, 10 thefts, 15 auto thefts, for a total of 59. So there's a slight increase, and we kind of expect that with the warmer months that it increases a little bit, but didn't have any homicides. We'd like to see those assaults down, of course. And so that's what we had for Hawthorne for May. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay. Anyone? Questions? Bill, thank you. Sean, you're raising your hand. You got a question?
Yeah. Does he have, Bill, do you have any information about the youth, the 14-year-old that was killed in the McKinley neighborhood that's been getting a lot of media attention? I know they're doing a press conference at Shiloh.
Yeah, so what we do know is it's an ongoing investigation. We had one of our lieutenants went up to the Minneapolis public schools to get some information too. So it might be somebody that we're not sure yet, but it's looking like it might be somebody that he was associated with. But like I said, we do have some information, but there's not a lot we can share. It's an ongoing investigation, but it might be some associates of his.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Okay, well, Bill, thank you. As always, kudos to you and all of your colleagues at the department, the precinct, for doing an excellent job and working with us to keep our community safe and healthy. Thank you so much. So let's continue to the HUEMAN report. And this week, we're going to have that report presented by Dr. Rhonda Marie. Is that Rhonda Marie Chacolas?
Thank you. Good morning. Happy June 1st, everybody. We have a lot of exciting information, and kind of to piggyback on the information that we discussed in terms of health, it is important to hydrate. And when we talk about hydrating, we want to say hydrating with water, avoid those sugary beverages, limit that use of Gatorade. I know people tend to go to that right away, but that is loaded with lots of sugar and salts. And so I am so excited to be here and first of all, talk about one of the events that we will be hosting, and that will be honoring Lou Fuller. And Lou Fuller, for those of you who don't know, was the first director of the MDH Office of Minority Health. And she was committed to eliminating health disparities that existed in our community. And so we will be honoring her Friday, June 16th from 12 to 3 p.m. at the Urban Research and Outreach Engagement Center, also known as UROC. We would love to have you. Invitations will be coming. Also, we've all talked about the opioid crisis and those things and how they are affecting our youth. And so HUEMAN will be conducting a series of trainings with several young people, Youth Saving Lives. Those young people will get Narcan training. They will get traumatic bleed training, and they also will get some training on how to respond to mental health crisis. The goal of that project is we will be getting several youth ambassadors who will also be training other young people. So lots of that to come. It's an exciting month for HUEMAN because we have about 20 different health fairs that we will be involved in throughout the community in partnership with many organizations, Hawthorne, City of Minneapolis, and we are excited for this summer. Feel free to reach out to me with questions, and thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Any questions or comments? Okay, great, thank you, Dr. Chacolas. So now we have a special announcement from Diana, right? Honoring those who make us better. Diana, I'm passing the microphone to you.
Thank you, Al. You know, this is so interesting. Let me see if I could share my screen here. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
I am so proud to say that Mr. Clarence Jones, as of today, is an adjunct instructor in medicine for the Mayo Clinic. Let's give Clarence a round of applause. He did not know I was going to do this. And as we say, Dr. Rhonda Marie, when we grow, we grow. So all of us, Hawthorne, HUEMAN, everyone that University of Minnesota that surround Clarence, we are happy. So we just want to say thank you, Clarence. Can you please say a few words?
I didn't know that you want to do this, but thank you. Few words.
Miss Ann, I think you're up.
Congratulations, Clarence. That's wonderful. So I am going to do the first award that we give for people who we want to honor here at the Hawthorne Huddle. And I am really excited to do the one I get to do because this is someone who has worked very hard for a long time. And I'm going to talk about a slice of his work, just a slice of it, because it's what I know best. Representative Fue Lee is a study in, I would say, perseverance and persistence. He has worked very hard in the legislature to ensure that our children and young people have access to after-school activities. And this year, after, I want to say, Representative Lee, you certainly can correct me, but it's been at least 8 years that you have been working with Ignite After School and other youth-serving programs. You have been able to help secure $30 million over 4 years for the after-school community learning bill that will benefit children across the state, children and young people who want to engage in after-school activities who would not otherwise be able to do that. Representative Lee is the chief author of that bill and has been the whole time. So we want to thank you for that, but just for all of the work that you do on behalf of the North Side, in behalf of the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. So thank you so much for your work. You've just been great. I know that the folks at Ignite love working with you because you are just great. You're just great to work with. So thank you. So on behalf of all of us, and just for our kids, for all of your great work, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. And I'm very happy to present this to you, Representative Lee. And I would open to other people having comments before we ask.
I'd like for him to say a few words, and if others have comments, put them in the chat so we can get them ready.
like I said, that's a slice. Representative Lee has done a ton of work this year and over the years, but I wanted to highlight that because that's the work I do. And I know how hard it was to get this money. $30 million, folks, over 4 years. That is a lot of money.
We would like for Representative Lee to say a few words.
Well, thank you everyone so very much for this award. Really appreciate this. And you are correct. You know, it took us, you know, almost, I think, 7 years for me. And then just a background context for everyone here, as you all may know, during the budget deficits back in the Patalenti era, that's when they took away all the after school funding. And so we haven't had any after school funding from the state until now. And so I'm really excited that, you know, the three of us were able to fight for this funding for the entire state. Unfortunately, it's only for the next 4 years. And so as we continue to move on, how we're going to look at how we could put this into the base budget for our education so that we don't have to come back every year for a high quality after school program. And so I'm really excited and just want to say thank you all again for honoring me with this award this morning.
Okay, great.
Clarence, I think you're up. You're muted, Clarence.
Yeah.
I get so excited sometimes I forget. I'm going to be Hawthorne is really honored to be present an award to Representative Esther Agbaje. I hope I'm saying that correct. Okay. She is the state representative for District 59B for Minneapolis. And when I was looking up information about you, because I don't know much about you, but when I was looking up information about you, you're a renter, you are a transit rider, you're a lawyer, you're a leader. And I was looking at some of the things that you were focusing in on, and these are things that are of interest to Hawthorne, which was affordable housing, healthcare, and public safety. But even more interesting enough, as I was reading about you, I thought about a poem that I learned back in 8th grade. It was called "If" by Rudyard Kipling, and it was some things about your work that just struck me, and I want to just say just a few words. I'm not gonna read it all, just a few ones. But it was if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, don't lose the common touch. If neither friends nor foes, nor loving friends can hurt you. Anyway, that poem spoke a lot to me about you, and I don't think I've ever had anybody who I've read anything about that it struck me as being so appropriate for. So on behalf of Hawthorne, I would just want to thank you for the work that you've done. We want to recognize you, and we appreciate the work that you're doing, and any kind of way that we can be of assistance to you, we would love to do that. So I'm gonna do that too. Anyone has any additional comments they want to make before we ask the representative to say something?
This is Sean. I'd like to say something. I met Esther through the Volunteer Lawyers Network. I was the Housing Court Project Clinic Coordinator, and I coordinated a number of lawyers, whether it was working with the legal aid as well as the VLN offices. And Esther was one of the attorneys I would work with as we would screen clients and then draft legal documents and give legal advice. And she was always respectful, kind, courteous, smart, thoughtful in terms of how she presented information to the clients who were facing a lot of stressful situations and dealing with going to court and dealing with eviction actions. And so I'm so happy I had a chance to work with her very close. And so when I heard she was running from state representative, I was very excited, and I'm happy for her to be in the House and to get recognition.
Thank you. Representative Esther, could you just give us a couple of words?
Yeah, thank you all so very much. I am truly honored by this award. It has been my privilege to serve the District 59B, which covers parts of Hawthorne, and work with, as Sean said, I worked with him before, and it's great to work with him again in this capacity and work with all of you. And just thank you so much for the support, and really looking forward to continuing our progress together. I think Al was saying earlier that there's like a new era of leadership coming in. So that feels quite daunting, but I know that together we can, we can achieve the goals that we justly deserve. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. So Al, before you do your turn, I would like to say a few words about this next person, because I've given you three a new name. The three of you guys are now the three amigos. And that's true. That's you guys, boy, I just have to give all three of you your credit. But this next person, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, he is very dear and near to me. And I really want to say this again, that I personally did invite him to come today. So I just don't want him to say that I didn't, okay? So Mr. L, go ahead.
Okay, well, everybody knows talking about the one and the only, the illustrious leader of the state of Minnesota legislature, the Senate President, Bobby Joe Champion. I had so much fun running a cover photograph on Inside News with the word President Bobby Joe Champion. I think our intent was to foreshadow what lies ahead in the opportunity of leadership and service that is the track he's been on from the beginning, and that he continues to demonstrate in a marvelous and powerful way as the president of the Senate and as our representative for Senate District 59. So Bobby Joe, as we all call him, is just the coolest guy. I've seen him operate in court. My family has hired him as an attorney to support us when we had challenges and needs, and he always performs and outperforms any situation or adversary. So we know that, and that's a personal testimony. But that same integrity and that same energy he puts into his work serving us in the Minnesota Senate, not only serving us, we're first, but he's also serving the entire state of Minnesota. And he doesn't have a problem navigating and managing and knowing how all of us are connected. So he's operating with a vision that is greater, that is expansive, that also keeps us, his people, his constituents at the center and at the table of decision in ways that deliver benefit. Everybody I've talked to in the past few days has been singing praises to the marvelous leadership and work that Bobby Joe has done, and in saying so, the team that he's leading as well. And so, Bobby Joe, it's just an honor to know you, to call you a friend. Well, let me tell you guys this. I had recommended to Bobby Joe a place to get some Jamaican food in St. Paul. He went and checked it out. He said, Adam, there's a place that I get food from, a person who fixes it at home, and it's really, really great. I said, okay, cool. And called up one day, Al, I'm getting this food. I'm going to bring it by your house. I said, what? And so can you imagine a senior citizen in North Minneapolis getting the state senator dropping off a hot meal? Bobby Joe, you're the best. So Bobby Joe, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to honor you from the Hawthorne Huddle, giving you this award of appreciation for your outstanding vision, dedication, and commitment to excellence. Thanks for putting community first. I'd be remiss if I didn't also elevate and celebrate your work in the field of, I call it the ministry of the gospel, with the music that you lead with the Excelsior organization. So Bobby Joe, say a word. Anybody else want to say something to Bobby Joe before we ask him to talk? So Bobby Joe, you can respond to all this praise that Diana and I are putting on you.
Al, if you don't mind, I would be remiss if I did not honor Senator Champion. Senator Champion was one of my mother's most favorite sons, and it's been amazing as a young person watching you grow personally and professionally. I am so honored that you represent us and continue to blaze trails. Thank you so much for what you do for us.
Shamika.
same. I couldn't let this moment pass without saying something, not only as Senator Champion's executive assistant, but as a friend, as a community partner. I'm so proud of the work that you managed to do this session and all the other sessions. You spent so much time pouring back into people in the community and giving me a chance in your office and just bringing people along with you. So I'm so proud of your work, and congratulations to you and Representative Agbaje and Representative Lee. You really are like the best team, and we have the best Senate district. So congratulations.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So Bobby Joe, just a brief comment before we have you guys speak about the review, but go ahead.
Well, let me just first of all say thank you to everyone on the call. Hawthorne Huddles is near and dear to me. Of course, I remember the last time I was here. And yes, it's true that Diana did not invite me the last time, but I found a way to get here because you all were doing just a marvelous thing even then when you were recognizing Shamika Bogan for all the great work that she does inside and outside of my office. She is just a community jewel, and I thank you for recognizing that. Thank you, Dr. Chicolas. It's so funny for me to say Dr. Rhonda Marie Chicolas. Oh my God, right? She even let you all say Marie, which is kind of interesting, just for continue to represent your family and your mother, who you know has always been near and dear to my heart. And Al, you know that you are the best. I call you my mentor, you know, and call you up and harass you, and you always show such patience, and so I appreciate that. And Diana Hawkins, you know, I appreciate you, and thank you also for recognizing the work of Esther and Fue, or Representative Agbaje and Representative Lee. They are truly amazing, and they are so focused, and we have a collective vision, and we are focused on Senate District 59 because we have this belief that if it's good for Senate District 59, it's good for the rest of the state. And so I just thank them for just being a great team, and we are a legislative team. So there's nothing I do that they should not get credit for, and vice versa, because we really do work as a team. Clarence Jones, let me say congratulations to you for the Mayo highlight this morning. And I do think that's important for us to elevate, and others to elevate, members of our community so that we can be proud. I'm often proud of making Esther Agbaje tell people that she graduated from Harvard, right? Because I think our young people should always know that you can do whatever you put your mind to. And so she gets embarrassed every time I say it, but I'll keep embarrassing her because she is just a phenomenal person. And she never leads with that. She leads with her heart, which is even more of a reason why you need to elevate it. Because we do know some, you know, Harvard people, others who've gone to Ivy League schools that look down on other people, but she never ever lets that be the guiding principle. And even though Fue went to Carleton College, and I went to McAllister, I won't hold that against them. So let me just say that, you know, first, lastly. But the last thing that I'll say is thank you for the award. Thank you for just you all supporting us as we did the Crown Act, and Representative Agbaje was, you know, the House author, and I was the Senate author. We did Juneteenth as a state holiday this year. We did Restore the Vote. We did Ban the Box and Expungement before, and we even now have an Office of Missing and Murdered Black Women, right? As well as housing, whether it's Bill Wealth and all the other housing notions that we believe to be important, and the equity provisions that you will see rolling out more and more, whether it's in capital investments, where Chair Lee has been our fearless leader over on the House side. And so we just are appreciative of all things that we are able to do. So I'll just say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to Shamika, who I could not do this work without. And I just appreciate just the recognition. And I think that will be it. So I won't continue to talk.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Senator Bobby Joe. Thank you so much. So Diana, we're going to have the team, the dream team, back to do the debriefing in a couple of minutes. Is there one thing before that we want to do, or are we ready to go into that right now?
Nope, you can go into it because I don't see him here. I don't see Tito here. Okay. So, you know, have at it.
Okay, well then, let's. This is a great segue. We're honored to be able to listen to and hear and see these three great legislators in person here at the Hawthorne Huddle. And we want to spend the main program, the balance of the program, as much time as they have available anyway, to get a legislative update. And Bobby mentioned a number of the things, but maybe in the course of the next few minutes, they can each go into their particular successes and challenges and report out to us things that we need to be aware of, and how do we support the execution of the intent of legislation they created, shaped, and delivered on our behalf. So let me start back with the leader, the president of the Senate, Senator Bobby Joe Champion, and ask him to just start, and you can direct this where you can invite in your colleagues, Representative Fue Lee and Representative Esther Agbaje, so that between the three of you, you've given us a robust summary of what has happened and what we can expect following up. Finally, let me say that before the program started, I was mentioning that you all represent a sea change. And I was reflecting on the fact that back in the day when Jim Casserly was in what's now 59B, and I think Jim Rice was in what's now 59A, and Tennyson was in the Senate seat. And that group represented an era of massive expansion of opportunity. Pretty much they reshaped them, along with Lou DeMars, John Darris, and other city council members, reshaped the face of downtown Minneapolis and reshaped the neighborhoods through the community development block grant initiatives. We're at a point now where there's opportunity to do massive next level work. And I think that Representative Fue Lee and Representative Esther Agbaje and our leader, Bobby Joe Champion, are going to be excellent and perform in ways that we can only call next level. So we're witnessing history, and for that, I'm grateful. And I want us all to think about it and talk about it as a moment of history that we're all part of. We're all in this together. Bobby Joe.
Thank you so much. And we've done this a while. So how we've done it is we have let each of us talk about certain areas that we sort of lead in, but it's our teamwork, right? So even though one person, let's say Esther, may be talking about housing, which she will, and other things, that's our team doing that work because we work together, right? So, and then Fue Lee, of course, will talk about, capital investments and other things, but again, it's our team. So because Esther's the lady of our group and the queen of our group, we always let her start off first to sort of lead and go the way that she wants, and she can highlight some of the other things outside of like the PROAC and other things. So as Representative Agbaje.
Well, thank you, Senator Champion. Yes, as Senator Champion says, everything we do is in conjunction with each other because we want to make sure that we are appropriately representing District 59. I'll just jump right in, on housing, which has been my major passion. We did $1 billion, actually probably closer to 2 billion if you look across all the budget areas, but in the main housing budget itself, we did about $1.2 billion of investments in housing, which is the first time the state of Minnesota has ever done anything like that. The analogy we've been using all session is that usually the state budget of Minnesota, if you think of it as a gallon of water, we had only been spending 1 tablespoon of that amount on housing. And so now, I don't know what the new analogy is going to be now, but we've set a new baseline of $1 billion. And it is really now my mission to make sure that we never go below that again. So what does that entail? That entails support for people who are experiencing homelessness. We're doing more funding in shelter capital, I think at least $150 million, as well as emergency support services for those who are experiencing homelessness so they can get off the streets. Then if you move along the spectrum, we're also supporting those to make sure they're not paying more than 30% of their income. So if you qualify, we are developing a new state voucher program that basically would work in the same way that Section 8 does at the federal level. And so we're hoping that will put more people, more families into housing. and in affordable housing, truly affordable housing that they can actually afford, that's calibrated to how much money they're making. And then as you continue to move along the spectrum, we're also building more housing and preserving more housing. So hopefully those rental prices can come down. And then finally, we have invested about $150 million, if not more, in first-time home ownership. So particularly for those who are first generation, that maybe their parents never owned a home, they've never owned a home, but they have the income, they've been saving, they've done everything that they need to do. We're providing 10% or up to $32,000 in down payment assistance, which can be layered with other programs that are out there. So the Star Tribune actually ran a story, and they had an example of a person that used 6 down payment assistance programs to get their house. And so this is something that we want to be like that, to add to the resources that people can have. So that's kind of the basic overview of housing. It's one of those things where we want to continue to make sure that we're building more housing, we're preserving more housing, we're bringing those prices down, and we're just ensuring that people have a safe and dignified place to live. On the healthcare front, I think some of the biggest news that came out there is the expansion of Minnesota Care. We are expanding that to our undocumented residents in Minnesota. And so wanting to make sure that people really do have that full access to healthcare, because we know that so many people go without, and then that leads to long-term detrimental impacts, particularly to themselves or their families or their ability to hold on to a job. So we want to make sure that Minnesota Care is expansive for that. We've also looked into, I think, now that the COVID emergency at the federal level has ended, we're making sure that families who have been on Minnesota Care and Medicare can stay on them, especially if they have young children, so they don't have to complete that paperwork all over again. So that's something that will happen. And then also, as it relates to Black maternal health, Representative Richardson had a bill that passed this year that allows people to have a person in them while they're going through pregnancy care. And so they have a designated person, which we know is really important because particularly for Black women, we are more likely than our white counterparts to face discrimination or other issues that can exacerbate any complications that we would have in pregnancy. And so by having that designated support person, that can be an advocate that you can bring in with you to ensure that doctors and nurses are doing their job and taking care of you appropriately. I don't know what other issues I usually talk about. Oh, so youth engagement type pieces. So we put in a lot in our education budgets, our capital investment budget, I think in our health budgets too, to ensure that we're also supporting young people. One of the programs that Senator Champion and I work on is with the Dr. Verna Price and her husband Shane Price. They have a program to support young people, particularly from our communities, making sure that they stay in school, that they have the mentorship that they need, that they can see a professional path for themselves. So we increased their funding this year. And I think there's also, Representative Lee talked about his after school program work that he's been doing. So that will continue to support our young kids, making sure that they have options and choices that allow them to play and explore safely with safe adults, as well as ensuring that they still get to be kids. And so that's kind of that's a snapshot of what we were able to do. We did so much. Some of the areas that we don't always talk about as much, but might be interesting to folks, is in our agriculture budget. We actually hit 20% of that budget going to BIPOC farmers. And so that means that those who are interested in farming, whether urban farming or acquiring land, outside of the urban areas, they have the ability and the access to do that. So we have a number of programs that are dedicated specifically to that. Also our legacy funding budget, which is funding that comes from a state tax that Minnesotans decided wanted to go into arts, culture, preserving our environment. A bigger number of that money is also going towards communities in our neighborhoods, to ensure that our culture and our heritage is also being addressed at the same level as other Minnesotans. So I'll stop there and hand it back to Senator Champion and also take any questions. So.
And let me highlight a couple of things or underscore some of the things that Representative Agbaje talked about. One is the work with Representative Ruth Richardson, which continues. Remember, I talked about the Office of Missing and Murdered Black Women. Representative Richardson and I, all of us worked on that, as well as most people don't know that we even changed the law last year about organ transplant donors. At one time, they used race as a determination to determine if you can get an organ transplant, and then how they dealt with race, it was negatively when you think in terms of people of color, because they would say, hey, if you got this organ transplant, we're not sure that you should get it because you live in this zip code and you're Black and you won't necessarily do the things that you need to. So we took discrimination out of that. As it pertains to even young people, we passed a number of juvenile justice provisions that would help prevent young people from getting in trouble, intervene if they get in trouble, but also have consequences that would be appropriate to allow them to change their behavior in the juvenile justice system. Dr. Verna Price and does Girls Taking Action. It used to be Girls in Action, but now it's Girls Taking Action. And so she's expanded that program, and Representative Agbaje is right. We've expanded that, and we've expanded to also embracing Shane Price, who does a lot with formerly incarcerated men and employment and all those other things. And so we were successful in getting them some resources along with Restore the Vote. We know that we are excited about the fact that 55,000 of our Minnesotans will be able to vote this year. Now, last but certainly not least, before we go on to Representative Lee, we also made sure that there was money available for the Minnesota African American Museum, so that they could get some resources that they need. And we're looking at changing some things when you think in terms of legacy. And so that's an ongoing fight. But along with the Minnesota African American Museum, Charles Copwell, we got some money for a project that he's going to do with some young people. So we are excited about that as well. And with that, I will go on to our worthy chair of capital investments, who can, talk about, North Side projects, and then anything else that he believes to be important, and what were the guiding principles around capital investments, because we got a number of folks from North Side. If we were just to concentrate in North Minneapolis, that got some great things. So with that being said, Chair Lee.
Thank you, Senator Champion. I'm really excited. Today the governor will actually be signing the capital infrastructure bill that we passed, the 2.6 billion, the largest infrastructure bill that we will have in state history. And to Senator Champion's point, I think just looking on the spreadsheet of the organizations or the folks that will be receiving funding on the North Side, did some rough math. Roughly 40 million will be coming directly to us. The link, it's an emergency shelter, Neon with their food incubation business, Appetite for Change. We got 6 million for Avenues for Youth, shelters. We got funding for PICA, Head Start, Phyllis Wheatley, Kemp Parson. I know that Senator Champion's been pushing for that. Senator Champion was able to get some funding in for Turning Point. Our big win was funding for V3. That will be a big community asset for the entire North Side. We also got funding in there for We Win Institute, and then also for the Satori Village housing development. And so those are just the one that I could think of that you could actually draw it to the North Side. But just remember that the investment that we made throughout the entire state is 2.6 billion, and it'll be signed into law today. And so just touching on some other points around education, I do want to note that, we finally got ethnic studies passed. I don't know about all of you, but, growing up the North Side, I did not know that we have such a thing as Asian American studies, African American studies, or anything like that. And now we have ethnic studies that will be offered in all of our public schools going forward. We're increasing the number of school counselors that we have to address some of the mental health issues and some of the other issues that we're seeing within our education systems. And then also closing the special education crop subsidy and the EL, the English language learner subsidy, so that we could actually, our district could actually have more funding for them to provide the work that we ask of them. And I think something that's will be impactful for the entire state, but specifically for the Hawthorne area. Senator Champion and I, ever since we got in, been fighting for cumulative impacts, and now we finally have that, where before the state of Minnesota permit any polluting industries in the North Side or any other parts of the states that are vulnerable, that they had to consider current, past, and future pollution before permit is moved forward. And then the HURT facility in downtown Minneapolis, we have an appropriations in the capital investment bill for Hennepin County to build a new digester facility in Brooklyn Park. And we have language in there that, if they want that funding that we have allocated to them, that they need to come up with a plan to close down the HURT. That's a requirement under law right now. And so I'm really excited about that. Just some of the other environmental justice piece, we created a community air monitoring pilot program. And so I would encourage all of you who has an interest in our, air pollution over here, just, the quality of our air, take a look at that and apply for some of that funding. That's for community groups like all of you to actually apply for funding to get these equipment so that we could track the air quality in North Minneapolis and report it to the state to see if we could actually have some meaningful policy to address the concerns that we have. And so I'm really excited about that piece. And then, just continuing on with some of the fight that we've been having, that if there's going to be any environmental pollution, like Northern Metals or any other bad actors like that, that 40% of that funding comes back to the local community that will be impacted if a settlement is over 250,000. So that, if you're being, taken advantage of, or you're being hurt because of one of these polluting industry, that you directly get the funding. And so I'll just leave it at that for right now. And then I know that Representative Agbaje may be able to speak more about the tax policies that we have. I know that, a lot of us are taxpayer. And so just so quickly, we have dedicated 160 million per biennium for local government aid. So that will, hopefully that will lower some of the tax burden on property tax or renters here in North Minneapolis, in our community and throughout the entire state. And then we also allocated 160 million per year for county aid too. And so even though that may not directly come into your pocket, that will help, hold the city and the county from, raising property taxes to fund some of the critical services that they are providing. And so I'll just leave it at that for right now and turn it back over to Senator Champion or Representative Agbaje if they want to add anything else.
I'll just add on the tax piece. There's also provisions in there to help keep property taxes level, so that way they're not increasing exponentially over the years. So I know that's something that definitely directly affects our community. So we're hopeful that that will help keep property tax rates the same for folks. Similarly, going back to kind of young families, we have a very expansive child tax care credit. So families will receive $1,750 per child if they qualify, which the phase out starts at $35,000, and it phases out, I think, by like 12%, depending on how much income you have. But it does mean that, even up to like $50,000, $60,000, you'll still receive something for your kids. And so I think that that's really beneficial for folks to make sure that they are having the support that they need to continue to take care of their family. So we're really proud about that, as well as having those, again, who are I-10 filers who may not have a social security number, to also be able to partake in that as well. And so we're just, a lot of the policies that we pass were just very expansive and very inclusive of all of our communities. And so, so we're really glad that we were able to get many of those things through.
And on that note, also remember that when we first started session, we did federal tax conformity, which was roughly $100 million. And then the tax bills, $4 billion in cuts. That also includes, for some people, those WAS checks that are coming. So there are those who are excited about that and those who are like, oh, okay. But we want to make sure that you're clear about that. And in the tax bill is also money for public safety, and that definition is expanded. It's roughly $350 million. That was also to help fund and deal with the 2 gun provisions that we were able to get passed. One was universal background checks, and also the red flag law. So that's monumental, just because we haven't always had that opportunity. And when we think in terms of education, NAS, Northside Achievement Zone, of course, received money. And then when you think about housing, Build Wealth, and 9,000 Equities, where there's this intentional strategy to make sure that African Americans or Black folks are able to, to purchase a home, because we understand that the threshold to improving your quality of life or building wealth is home ownership. All right. So jobs and economic development, that's the place where I'm the chair. We spent roughly $968 million. And so there's the workforce side, the economic development side, and then we had some a 500 million, which ended up getting, you know, diced up a little bit around making sure we have revenue available for entities that are competing for federal loans, federal grants, such as semiconductors. Those are those chips that are in everything that we have. And so when you design them, the manufacturing right now is happening in, let's say, Europe. And if we want to get something manufactured, usually you have to go there. So what happens if Europe and others decide that they don't want to sell to us? It's an issue of national security. So the Department of Defense has really been pushing us in order to make sure that we do something on state level, even though the federal government has done roughly $52 billion, 39 billion of that is supposed to go towards outreach and connections with people of color. So we allocated $250 million to semiconductors, Polar, and others, just to make sure that that's clear. And then we did $100 million for bio-industrial manufacturing. Did you not know right now, and our federal champion in that area has been Congresswoman Betty McCollum. Did you not know that they can take a dandelion and reproduce some of the things from it so that there are products that can be put in the marketplace to even do rubber? So there's all these innovative things that can happen. I know I did say a dandelion because we're usually trying to get dandelions out of our yards, but there are ways by which to do it. But also, in addition to that, that's that one notion. When we think in terms of workforce and economic development, we've had a number of people from North Minneapolis, from Kenya McKnight that we have given money to, Tim Baylor, Emerge, Summit OIC. This list is so expansive, where we've tried to touch in every area possible. But also, what I'm also excited about is the Promise Act. We have allocated $125 million that is going to North Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, St. Paul, and some for rural Minnesota, because we do have to think about them. And there's a certain allocation for North Minneapolis of roughly $32 million just in this area alone. And 80% of that number is for grants. Not for loans, it's for grants. And we even have micro grants. So those businesses that make less than $100,000 a year, they can apply for micro grants. Then those businesses that make less than $350,000, and then any business can do a low interest, 0% interest loan that's forgivable. And the two entities that are going to be controlling this money and working with our neighborhood associations and groups, MEDA, which is led by Dorothy Bridges, a Black woman, and NDC, which is led by another Black woman. Her name is Renee Dossman. So we're really excited about that, the Promise Act, the possibility, and the way to go forward. And that still means you still got emerging developer money that we got in there. Competitive grants is a lot of money, and it's intentionally dedicated, along with jobs and economic development. And I can answer more questions about that. And you can see the long list of people who have received money. What you don't see in that job bill is money for Dr. Bravada Akinsanyan doing the work there in order to make sure that we are grooming and getting Black folks and African Americans and Africans or people of color involved in the mental health notion. So it's the African Wellspring, I think is what they call it. And Al can correct me on that name, but we got money for them as well. But as I was mentioning, in addition to jobs and economic development, you have paid family and medical leave. We finally got that passed this year, so that will help folks. We have earned safe and sick time. That's something else. There is a lot of discussion around transportation and the blue line. We got some language in that bill that would help Lynn Park and others, where folks are concerned about how the municipalities came up with the preferred route. And so there's a real incentive in there for that dialogue to be reopened. Cannabis, most people have been hearing about. We passed that. There's a expungement process where I was on WCCO yesterday talking about that. proactive. Women can decide what they want to do with their body. We at the government should not be making that decision. And so we're excited about that. And even though this seems non-sexy, I'm talking about catalytic converters. And so we've had so many thefts when you think in terms of catalytic converters that we had to do something. And so some of the OIC also got money. It's just a cross section of intentionality around resourcing our community, both on the workforce and economic development side, capital investments in education. I can go through almost every bill where we pushed around inclusion and us at the forefront. Now, does it account for everything that we want? No. But we are certainly much further along than we were before, and I'm excited about that. So there's so much we could talk about. I can think of more that we should be talking about because we have had such a dynamic and wonderful session thus far. And so I'll pause there to see if there are any questions.
Let me start. Oh, go ahead, Clarence Jones. Go ahead. Unmute Clarence. You're still muted.
Great. Okay. I'll start again. I think the work that has been done is phenomenal. I am so excited. I do have one question though, because it's been a conversation that has been going on in the community with a lot of people. It's about North Commons Park. Could we have some conversation about that? I mean, is there some funding for them, or is it?
So just so you know, we gave money for North Commons before, and was the catalyst. We gave North Commons 5.125 million cash, and that was when they had first come. They were talking about what they wanted to do. They leveraged that money with the city, county, and others, where they should have over $11 million just from that deal. And then it's my understanding their foundation raised some money. North Commons has to decide what they want to do with the money that they have now. And it's been sort of up in the air. And so I would just encourage them to become much more comfortable understanding what they want to do and what is their plan. Because their plan is kind of all up in the air. Not to mention, one of the concerns that I've had has been the programming. What are they going to do? Just to say you want to build a building and don't have a real plan around it is just not helpful. But we have made an investment with them. But I wasn't going to do any more until North Commons sort of figure out what it is that they want to do and what they're going to do with the revenue that they already have. And to be honest, they would give us one figure, then we shoot for that figure, and then that figure moves. And so it's always a constant sort of moving target.
And I appreciate the candid conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's all I can be, is honest and
all
candid.
Right. Okay.
Because sometimes people put it out there like, North Commons. Well, we were the one, even when North Commons wasn't a priority for the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. We made it a priority. We pushed for it, and we made sure that they got $5.1 million and that they could leverage that, because they were not doing any of the things. The park board wasn't doing any of the things in order to make North Commons a priority. But since then, we've also talked about their pool. Like, you know, there are days when it would be super hot outside, like it is 90 degrees, and you go by there and there'd be no kids there, right? Because there was a cost associated with it. But then we can go on 44th and there would be no cost, right? And there are tons of families there. And not to play one against the other, but I want there to be consistency across the system that encourages us all to take advantage of these great assets. Any other questions? Al, it looks like Ann has a question.
Ann, go ahead.
Yes, Senator Representative, a question for you about early childhood. I had a briefing yesterday about some of the amazing things that have happened for early childhood, and you talked about the child care tax credit already, but if you could address a couple of other things. You know, the early childhood kind of community has worked hard for years to get some things to happen, and some things have happened, and I'm wondering if you could talk about some of those things.
Anyone want? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of give like a framework of what happened this year. So, you know, this was I don't know if it was the first time, but first time in a long time that there is a dedicated committee to early childhood and families. And so the chair of that committee on the House side, I mean, that's actually his like singular focus. That's what everyone knows him for. So I know they definitely put a lot of funding towards supporting kids, especially those before going into preschool and kindergarten. There is additional funding, I think, for workers. So I don't know the specifics, but we can find out more for you. I don't know, maybe Senator Champion knows more from the Senate side, but my understanding is that they put in, again, significant investments across the board for early childhood education, making sure that kids would be ready before they started school, that parents' childcare costs could be covered, I think, in certain ways, and also funding a lot of the different organizations that support early childhood development. So that's actually really nice that had happened. And I think what we learned this year is that it was something that needed to be weaved into kind of how we consider both education and housing as we're supporting families over this time. So I don't know, Senator Champion, if you have more details, but that's kind of the general framework of what we worked with this year.
You know, the only thing that I'll add to that is that we all recognize that child care and early childhood is important, right? For the development of the child, but also we also learned that the cost is just astronomical. We're like, so how do we control that? How do we do more universal child care options where we are not competing with our residential home, daycares? We also know that in rural Minnesota that they're losing when we think in terms of child care as well. So there's been some intentional strategies to meet the needs of urban and suburban Minnesota, as well as rural Minnesota, when we think in terms of early childhood development and resources to really make sure that young people are getting the support that they need. One of the things that I think is also important is that when you think of the child care subsidy or child care assistance, I don't want it to be tied to whether a person has a job or not, because at one time there was this whole notion that if you had a job, then you could, use it. Then what happens when you lose the job or something happens? Now the kid has to suffer because they can no longer take advantage of the program itself. So we're trying to be thoughtful about how do we approach that? How do we make sure that we're supporting the child care industry, even with workers? How do we increase the reimbursement rate and all the other things in order to make sure that folks can really see a career in childcare if that's what they want to do, but not have to decide between their economic challenges and whether they want to follow their heart? It's sort of like being a teacher. One of the things that Dr. Chicolis's mother, Francine Chicolis, always talked about is the rewarding aspects of being a teacher, but yet teachers who are very valued and valuable in our society are always at the lowest, pay rate, right? And so we never value them financially. And so teachers, even in their work, would end up doing what? Taking money out of their own pocket because the system wasn't doing everything that they need to do in order to make sure that they had all the tools they needed in the classroom. So just valuing those things. And that starts also with early childhood, because that is the road, or putting us on the road to being lifelong learners.
Thank you both.
Any other questions?
I can't believe that Sean hasn't asked the question yet. I don't know what's going on here. Sean, why have you not asked the question?
Don't worry. Yeah, you were reading my mind. I do have a question. And it comes from the perspective of being a legislative intern on the House side. It was a DFL Tony Kinko up in Park Rapids. The fact of the surplus and so much has been allocated because of that surplus, because normally you run into a situation where it's like, well, we can't do this, we don't have any money. There was plenty of money available, and the things that you've talked about have been significant, but it seems like it would be helpful for the general public to have a listing of all the great things that Representative Lee and Agbaje and yourself, Bobby Joe, have done. Because what I'm trying to drive at is if the people can get a sense of the resources you have brought into the district and connect that with, it does matter about who's in party, whether it's the DFL or the Republicans, and how it makes a difference for the district would be helpful, because there's a lot of people out there that, you know, believe that elections don't impact them, elections doesn't have consequences. And so I've been thinking about a way in which people can really feel the impact of what the three elected officials for this district has done for the North Side. So that's the question I have, and I've, you know, been prodding some other people about, really spell out about the impact of resources that have been beneficial to the African American community, as well as the legislative districts that you represent. So that's my questions, getting that information out there so people can really understand it.
I think you're right, Sean. I think, you know, this is something that I've been having a couple sleepless nights about, not because of not feeling good about it, but because we've done so much, and that there are people who sometimes track it, or some people who only track a certain portion of it. You've heard Chair Lee talk about the impact in North Minneapolis, right? But guess what he didn't talk about? Ujama Place in St. Paul, Walker West, you know, all the others, and then also the Latino community and the Hmong community, and just other places, spaces where us pushing equity and inclusion and making sure that there's resource. I do think that there has to be a way to capture those two things, like what has been helpful in North Minneapolis, but also what's the larger picture and the larger impact as well. Because you got, you know, Latino economic development stuff, even in my bill, you got African Development Corporation. There are all sorts of entities where those entities may not be in North Minneapolis, but is that push and the guiding principles that we believe in that has resulted in success in those other areas, or in St. Cloud and Cairo and all the others. So I think you're right, and we will find a way by which to do that, because I do think that there is a need in order to separate those things out and then somehow report that out in a way so that people can actually see it and go, oh my God, because it is true. We had one-time appropriations here. There's some ongoing things that we had to try to put in place because there are ongoing needs, but we wanted to meet the moment. It's meeting the moment and making sure that the right people are at the table to continue to fight for what we all believe to be important. So I knew that you would have something to say, Sean, so don't try to hide anymore. I'm looking right at you in this box, buddy.
Yeah, I'll just add to that too, actually. So like the Posse Caucus, which all three of us are a member of on both our respective chambers, you know, we put out a one-pager that kind of just did a brief synopsis of all the work that we were able to accomplish this year for Black and Brown Minnesotans across the state. So I'll email that to you, Sean, and if you know, I know you have a huge listserv, so if you want to send that out
Can
to
you
folks.
put it in the chat?
I don't have it in an online format.
Okay.
I wonder if I can attach it in the chat. I'll
PDF
try to figure that out.
link or something like that would be great. To get.
But otherwise, I'll email to Diana and Sean and you, Al, as well. If you guys want to share that with folks. We're also, you know, the legislature also continues to put out like different reports of what happened. And so as those come out, we'll make sure that you guys get those. And then Dr. Bruce Corey is also really good at tracking a lot of what is specific to Black and Brown Minnesotans. And so I'll follow up with him to see if he's going to have another report for the end of this session about all the accomplishments and making sure that that gets out to community as well. And then we'll have our 59 report, and we'll also be doing a 59 event in the next couple of weeks. And, you know, we'll make sure everyone is invited to that too.
Yeah, that's good, because we are going to try to put something out like that, because I think that's so important to track all of this and really elevate the profiles and the work that has been done. So no, that's a great question, and thank you so much for following up on that, Representative Agbaje.
I have a question, Al.
Go ahead, Diana.
Are you guys doing, well, don't mean to say that, but are you doing anything around the opiates? Because that is just like really getting really, really bad.
You know, there's always work that's being done around opioids and also around addiction and that collective picture. So yes, there's a lot of resources that's going into that area. You heard, I heard about the Narcan sort of stuff and fentanyl, you know, and not just on a consequence side, but one of the things that I talked about, even when you think in terms of Broadway and Lindale, when we saw a ton of people always hanging out down there, and we could ride by and openly see people using drugs, right? And so I talked to whether it was a metropolitan, council to say, hey, how do we make sure not only do we clear out those areas, but we make sure that we got a turning point down there. We got some other folks down there that's talking to people about where you can go, what you can do in order to address the underlying issue, which is addiction. I think if we're going to be successful around public safety, that we have to deal with the root causes of public safety. We can't just deal with the surface matters. So yes, there's resources and money around opioids and fentanyl and making sure that more money is put into treatment options and specific cultural competency treatment options as well.
I think that's good because now they're trying to press the schools to have Narcan in there, stuff that's been legalized now. So I think that's great. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have
Oh.
Who was it?
Oh, it was me. Just
Go ahead,
to follow
Sean.
up what you said, Bobby Joe, talking about the intersection of Lindale and West Broadway, aka the murder gas station and Merwin's Liquor. When I go by there now, it appears that people are not hanging out, don't know the crime statistics going on there. But what I do feel is that if our state wants to not have the crime that was going on in a location like that, we can do something about that. And there was something done. What do you attribute to the change that took place?
A couple things. One is when you think in terms of what happens in a city, that becomes the responsibility of the city, right? Number one, the city's supposed to do something. Number two, that is also supposed to be in conjunction with law enforcement, but also community groups. I also attribute that to your 21 Days of Peace and your other people, or whether it's your the group that trades with, we push for peace or whatever. But there's and then the attorney general gets involved and starts saying, hey, business owner, you have some responsibility here too, right? You can't just sit here and ignore what's going on. And so I think it's the intentional understanding and decision of all partners to say we have to do something. Even Sanctuary Church, what they started doing some things there, right? So you got involvement of the faith community as well. So I think it's everyone coming together and recognizing that there's a challenge and a problem and doing something with it. Then you also had, as I sort of mentioned earlier, Turning Point and others going down there saying, hey, we have Turning Point around the corner. We can get you a bed, or we can, if you don't want to go to Turning Point, you want to go someplace else, we can make sure that happens. And so I think it's all of those components and pieces that really help contribute to what we're seeing in North Minneapolis, and specifically on Broadway and Lindale. Oh, and I'll mention the last thing. There was also some discussion about the park police and even with the Minneapolis Public Schools, because there was a discussion that we had at Hall Elementary School about young people walking through that way in order to get to Hall. Or those who were flowing over into the park by Hall School where kids were, and everyone had to be alerted and be like, okay, wait a minute, we have to do something about this, because if they're not just on Broadway, we got to deal with that, because young people are walking, past there, and we don't want anything to happen to our young people, but we also want to be concerned about the people who are there, and we don't want them, once they run off Broadway and Lindale, to spill over just into the park and that we do nothing about it. So I think it's just understanding the comprehensiveness of what needed to take place.
Thank you, Bobby Joe.
I have a general question or comment that I'd like you and the representative to respond to. I recently interviewed Representative Samantha Vang, who represents the northwest corner of Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center. And she was also a trailblazer, I think one of the youngest persons elected to the House of Representatives. I think the first Hmong, was she the first Hmong representative? Oh, certainly in Minneapolis, I think she was. But there may have been other Hmong representatives. Women, first woman.
Yeah, maybe from Minneapolis, because you had what's the name from St. Paul? Oh, anyway, I'll think of her name.
Yeah, right. So, but I think first and one of the youngest out of Minneapolis as a among women. But what that interview revealed is what I'm hearing again with you, Representative Esther and Senator Bobby Joe, and that is that you talked about is it Pocky or Pocky group?
Posse, like a
Pocky,
posse.
POCI.
Yeah.
And that's the people of color, what's the I stand for?
Caucus.
And indigenous.
And indigenous caucus. So that's really a big super game changer in the state political machinery. Would you guys both talk about what it's like, what it means, and what it holds in terms of an ability to cooperate, collaborate, and leverage the shared vision to support our communities? What she said is that we got to deliver a lot of money to our communities. You both have just attested to that as well. But there's an intentionality where sometimes in the past, maybe a generation ago, we had to kind of accept what happened when they finished their business. Their business might be the Iron Range, or it might be farmers, or it might be suburban, community growth. And when all that was done, then our representatives were able to say, what about us? And we ended up as communities getting kind of leftovers and crumbs. We weren't at the center of the negotiation in the way that you all are now. And that centeredness really puts you in a leadership position that hasn't been seen before. So talk about what it means to have the Pocky caucus and what the future holds for our citizens, our voters, and our community with you all operating in such a marvelous collaborative fashion. Senator?
I'll say, first of all, I think this is a really good question, and it's a very important one. Is because the Senate, for an example, has been the most diverse it ever has been in history. Mm-hmm. When you think in terms of Senator Muhammad, for an example, who worked with me on a number of different things, but we also know for driver's license for all as just an example, or Senator Umu Verbatim, or Senator May Quaid, right? And then there's others, right? And the importance of that ties into the Pocky caucus is when you have, and Senator Kunesh, when you have a number of voices at the table representing different aspects of Minnesota and lifting up those issues and having friends, there's something significant to having friends and other people who understands your plight and who's willing to work together in concert with each other and not feel like if the Hmong community gets something, then that means the African-American community can't. No, why can't we get it both, right? Why can't we get it for our Latino community? And having a mindset that is just not enough for me just to say only African Americans. Yeah, that's important, but what about my African community? What about on and on and on. And I think that I often say, and it's true, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And so I think the diversity of voices and a shared value system and a shared collective a drive to make sure that we get the things that we need to get as a community. And I expand the definition of community. And I was expanding the definition of community even when Senator Jeff Hayden was with us. Because I didn't say, oh, those people in South Minneapolis is not really my community. No. Those people in South Minneapolis is my community as well, which is how I could fight for the urban garden or fight for a pool in South Minneapolis because young people were dying because they didn't know how to swim, right? And so I think that having that understanding and saying whatever there are people that look like us, that those folks are part of our community as well. So I do think there's value in having diversity and diversity of thought, but a collective vision towards inclusiveness and for us to drive for the resources that all of our communities need.
Bobby, how did it feel? I remember reporting over the years, Insight calling you and Senator Jeff the dynamic duo, because you guys were there two people, but sounding like an army, and having to take on the attitude of being an army of two, representing all of Minnesotans, but making sure that our voices and our decisions, our issues get to the table. How did it feel from then to now, where you've got several more people of color in your chamber with you? That's question one. And I got a follow-up question too.
Well, I mean, feels good, number one. Let me just say it that way. Because in 2015, when Senator Heatlh and I were fighting for equity and fighting for direct appropriations at a time when there were no direct appropriations to us, and for us to say and demand that we do something because the system as it sat at that time was not helping us. Even if you had competitive grants, people were like, oh, you're picking winners and losers. Well, guess what? You have direct appropriations for all the other people you want. Right. And we recognize that the system as it sits is not working for us. So from there to now, where we got 35 million, but now to be able to say we got millions and millions of dollars that are directly appropriated to the communities that we want, because there's that intentionality to deal with the equities and the disparities or the disparities that we are dealing with in real time. So it feels good to be able to turn to 2 or 3 people who said, oh, no, I'm gonna fight with you. You're not alone. I'm going to fight with you. Let's go. Right. And so I do appreciate that.
Second part of the question is, how did it feel, Bobby Joe, to hit the gavel the first time? And how did it feel to close out the Senate session with your gavel as well? I watched you on TV, and I'm telling you that, like everybody else that I know that saw you either doing that online or live or in the news clips, it's just a feeling of pride to see you doing the business of our people and the business of our state, you being the business of our state. So how did you feel? Were you looking at yourself at the same time or just in the moment?
No, it's really surreal, right? Because when you're doing something like that, first of all, when you are working towards, or in that moment, you're saying, you know what, I'm going to run to be the president. I had no other person to look at to say, I'm following it in the footsteps of this person because this person was president. I would be the first. But you know whose footsteps that I was also walking in was those Randy Stanton and John Jefferson and and all the others that were there before me, right? May have been on the representative side and not the Senate side, but also understanding what my community sort of put in me too, right? Because we dare to think we could do anything in North Minneapolis, even though you're looking at yourself like, how are you going to do it? We always said we won't figure out a way to get it done. So when I took the gavel, that was the first time that I ever had even been in the president's rostrum. I would never go up there before. So I was in the chambers and knew what was going on because I always sort of follow along. I look at the rules and so on and so forth. But there are times when others had asked me like to fill in and I say no. I wouldn't, and I don't know why. I always said no. So when I did the first time, it was surreal because I recognized that I wasn't doing it just for me, but it's also for all of us, right? And I knew it's the most elevated position when you think in terms of visuals and television and attention. But I wanted to also revolutionize the presidency. I didn't want it to be just a figurehead position. I wanted to really be active and thoughtful, and also have a committee that has a budget, right? Do all the things that people are looking around saying, oh my God. But here's the thing. I could also understand the significance of the role because I've been in the minority before and I'm in the majority, but I'm still a minority. So I know what it feels like when people don't hear you or listen to you or let you talk or give you an opportunity to express your thoughts. And so it's amazing to me the number of people that I talk to who says, I watch you. And I never thought as many people watch the legislative process, but more people now telling me I watch because I'm watching you to see what you're doing, right? To me, that's rewarding. And lastly, Al, it's rewarding when young people come and they're from North Minneapolis or South Minneapolis, or they're kids of color, or they're Latino or whatever. And then when they introduce me as the president, their mouth dropped like, are you serious? Like, really? Like, yeah. Right. And then for them to talk and go in the office, because I have this office suite there, because I have 2 offices, one in the Capitol and one in the other place. And I let them come in the office. They just roam around and they're like, oh my God. your office? And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing. If I can do it, you can do it.
That's
There's
right.
nothing unique or magical about me, right? We have the same opportunity. Sometimes we have to fight harder, and I can be that voice and be able to speak to them because I can talk from experience, and they can see someone who looks like them and know that it's possible.
Esther, for in the last few minutes here, comment, same questions about, you know, being a new representative, a young woman, a young first generation. I think I tell people that I believe you and I talked about your heritage cultural group being Yoruba, right? Is that correct? And I'm a Yoruba, so I claim kinship to you in the name of our Yoruba. My DNA puts me in the Yoruba land as well. So, but you are a wonderful bridge then, because part of our community is fractured with the discussion about us being African Americans or ADOS, and the general Pan-Africanist view that was part of the political matrix. And we're kind of evolving, but all of that stuff sort of comes together in you, because you're African American, and you're not offended by the positions that different people take. You have the unique ability to understand and elevate and navigate and bring us all forward. So talk about your feelings and your experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that comes up a lot more now because there are so many, because there are so many more of us from different backgrounds in the legislature. I think people keep trying to find ways to divide us, and one of those is to try to continue to build this wedge between Black Americans who are descendants of slaves as well as Black immigrants who have come here, but who have also been here for ages as well. I like to tell people at the end of the day, we're all Black. They're all looking at us. They don't know until they know our name or we open our mouths, but even then they still don't care. So, once we get to America, we're all sort of in it together. And while we do have different experiences, and while that means that there may be different interventions that we need for different groups, it doesn't mean that we can't work together. And in fact, I think we're actually stronger when we do work together, because it shows that we understand the history that's been done to us, from the continent of removing people involuntarily, as well as the continued colonial experiment of destabilizing those countries in Africa, in the Caribbean, that has, even though it's a voluntary migration, has actually really kind of forced people to come to the United States. And so understanding that, in those experiences, we have a lot to fight for together to make sure that we get what we deserve in this country that has used the labor of enslaved Africans, or even also the labor and contributions of immigrants who've come here. And so I think that that's an interesting perspective. And, I'm happy to lend my voice to that as someone who grew up in the United States, spent my whole life in the United States, but also have parents that come from a different country and can speak to, what's happened in Nigeria specifically, but also having an understanding of what happened on the continent. Going back to the question also about like the Posse Caucus, I just want to add, I think the thing that's been really helpful is in the past couple of terms, we've seen an increase in the people of color from not only just the urban areas of Minnesota, but across the state. We are having more people of color representing rural areas in Minnesota. And I think that that's really important because we all live everywhere in this state. And I think, a lot of our white counterparts sometimes default us to like, oh, you must be from Minneapolis, you must be from St. Paul, but we're not. We're from the suburbs, we're from Moorhead, we're from Duluth. And I think having that perspective of just every Minnesotan, and also understanding that Minnesotans of color have a different lived experience than, our white majority counterparts. But our experience helps enrich in the state of Minnesota. And when we lead from a policy angle about that, we're actually helping everybody. Because when, Paul Wellstone says, when you know better, you do better, all, rising tide lifts all boats, all that type of stuff. That means that like, when we're working for those of us who have not been invested in, who have not received what we need, but when we do that, then that means everybody else is also getting what they need. So, I'd just like to end it there, that I think that having continued increased representation, I think is going to continue to make Minnesota an even better state and this year, should we continue it, which I know we will, I think people are really going to be having really positive impacts in their life for the years to come.
I think we should end the program right here. It's time to close out. Diana, go ahead.
I just want to remind everybody that next month is our break month, so we will not meet next month, but we will be back in August with the powerful panel. And I just want to thank Representative Ms. Esther and my good friend, Senator President, Mr. Bobby Joe Champion, for being here, and Representative Fue Lee with us today. Al, you can end the program if you would like.
No, I will. And just saying once again, on behalf of everybody in Hawthorne and our community, thank you to our political leaders. Keep up the good work. And obviously, you all can count on Insight News to be the voice and the vehicle for educating and creating awareness in our community, among others. With that, we'll see you in August. Take care. Thank you all.